Hi everyone, this is our fourth tutorial on processing continuously coming data. So in this tutorial we are going to see how we can send data to different destinations based on the data type. So when we have CSV and JSON, send the CSV to one database versus the JSON to another database, or to AWS S3 for example. And this tutorial is a continuation of the previous tutorials. So in part 1 we saw how to process, how to rename and backup continuously coming data using the file connector. And in the second part of the tutorial we saw how to send the data, how to insert it to a database, to MySQL, using the for each operation. And in part 3 of the tutorial we saw how to send data to two databases in parallel using for each and scatter gather operations. So in this tutorial, for the tutorial, we are going to generate data in CSV format and in JSON format and send one data type to one database and the other data type to another database. So this is what we created in the previous tutorial. We have from the file system we have this one, a listener on new or updated file, and a transformer that transforms the data. And under this for each we have scatter gather that sends data in parallel to MySQL and Postgres. So now we are going to modify this and see, based on choice, this operation, see if we can send the JSON data to one of them and the CSV data to the other one. So I have also a simple Python code that generates I'm going to be continuously writing CSV data and JSON data to my working directory, and I will create a variable that identifies the data type. So this is what we built in the previous tutorial. We have a working directory here. I have Python code that writes data to this location, and we want MuleSoft to pick it up from here and insert it to Postgres. We inserted it to Postgres and MySQL, and also we backed it up here under the backup. So now we will again redo a similar one, but what we are going to do is we are going to generate CSV data and JSON data, and send the CSV data to one database and the JSON data to another database. I have a similar Python code that I am going to add to the description section of the video. I'm going to add the link to my GitHub repository, so you can get the code from GitHub if you want to try it. So this tutorial, if you want to follow along, you have to have MySQL and Postgres installed, and there are many good YouTube tutorials on how to install them, so you can do that. Okay, so let's now modify this. So this is our listener. Our listener listens if there is new data in the working directory. This is my directory, and it checks if there is new data. Let me maximize this. It checks if there is new data. Okay, so here I think I was reading in only CSV data, but now we want to read CSV and JSON, so I don't need this file pattern now. I will just dump CSV and JSON data to that location, and I want this listener to check every 5 seconds and to delete the data from the original location and back it up after renaming it. So we are renaming the file by prepending rename to the original file name. So this is a listener. We have a logger here. The logger simply tells us the file name that is being processed. Now we need to add the file name. Let's extract the file name and create a variable here. So let's call it file type, and the value, click this fx, and the value should be attributes dot file name, and we just need the extension, so the last three characters, CSV for example, CS and V, so from -3 to -1 should create that. So this is file type. Then based on this file type, we are going to decide whether to send the data to Postgres or MySQL. Okay, so save this, and we have a transformation here. So we are just the payload will be in JSON, so we want to insert to the database each record at a time separately. So CSV, for example, each row will be inserted to the database at a time. That's why we are using for each row, which is for each object, it is going to write to the database. So before we use the scatter gather to insert the data to both databases in parallel, but now we want to check the data type. So rather than scatter gather, now what we want is the choice operation. So we have it here, and here let's bring this here. So in here, if the file the variable we created, we access it as first dot file type. If this is CSV, then we want to send it to, let's say, MySQL. So let's move this to here, or otherwise we want to send it to Postgres, the JSON file, we want to send it to Postgres. So we don't need this scatter gather now. This logger also, let's go here in Workbench. I have MuleSoft database created, and also I created a table called persons, and it has the same columns as the data that I'm going to generate. But now if you see, there are no records here under that table, so we are going to send the data to this table and check to make sure that data is being appropriately written to that table. The same thing with Postgres also. I created this database, and under it I have created the persons table. Let me refresh this. Refresh. So if we go here, we have the persons table, and these are the columns, the same columns. But if we run this, the only difference is we will have data generated in different formats, in CSV and JSON. So you see there are the same columns, but there is no any data, the number of rows. If the file is CSV, for each record, delete this and bring for each from here. From core, there should be for each. So bring it here. The same way, let me delete this and put here too. So in here, when the file type is CSV, then and we have for each operation, and we want to insert data to the database. So and the database module we are going to use insert here. The same thing, we grab insert and drop it here to insert to the other database. So let's check the connection here. Let's rename this insert to MySQL. Check the set up the configuration. This is MySQL, and the required library, since I set it up in the previous tutorial, it picked up from there, and it is the host is localhost, port is 306, user, I have root, password, I have a password that I created for the tutorial, so I can put this here, and the database is MuleSoft. So now we test connection. Okay, connection successful. So in here we have to put the SQL query text and also the input parameters. So our query text, I have to save time, I have it here in the notebook. So this is a query text, put it here. So basically we are inserting into the percent table, and these are the columns, and the values we are going to access them, we are going to specify them in the input parameters. Like before, the code for that is we just create this dictionary by accessing the column values from the payload. So if I maximize this here, we have the person ID is payload.person ID, last name is payload.last name, address is payload.address, and so on. So we save this. Now it looks good. Other one is for Postgres, so let's rename this insert Postgres, and we set up the connection. So for the connection, okay, we specify, first we have to specify the connection here. Since there is no Postgres here, we select generic connection, and we can add JDBC library using the add Maven dependency, and the Maven dependency we can get it online if we simply search Maven dependency Postgres. So go here and just pick it up, this one before. Okay, this dependency is already there, it says. So let me see if I can add from use local file. Oh no. Okay, so if I do this and finish, this should work. Okay, the URL to connect to Postgres, I have it. Where is it? The URL should be, this is the URL to connect to Postgres. We just give the database name here. So you can get this from in the description section. A link is included to the code in GitHub, so you can get it from there. So our database name is MuleSoft, and the driver class name also this one, put it here. User is Postgres, and password the same password as MySQL. So dump it here. Test connection. Okay, connection successful. So now we can put the SQL query text and the input parameters to here and here. They are the same in both MySQL and Postgres. So I can copy from here and paste it here, and also the input parameters, copy it from here and paste it here, and make sure this is an expression. So save this. So what we are doing here is we have this choice. This is like if else in other programming languages. If the data is CSV, we write it to MySQL, otherwise to Postgres. So we just have two data files. We are going to generate two data files, CSV and JSON. And the file type, I'm just creating it here under this variable by taking the file name and getting the extension from it. So okay, now the next thing we want to do is generate data, and also we are going to check the number of rows. So before we were checking the number of rows, how many rows are coming to each database, and now also we are going to do the same thing. And what we can do is let's generate data in like CSV, for example, more frequent than JSON. So when we check the count, we should see that in one of the tables there is more data than the other one. So to show you the data, let me create sample data and show what it looks like. So if I run this code, I have Python code that generated CSV and JSON data. So this should dump JSON data in my working directory. As you can see, this one. So these are the objectives. This is like equivalent to one row. Ooh. This one is equivalent to one row in CSV file, another one, and so on. So we are going to generate such JSON file, and also we'll generate CSV file as well. So let me show here. Just generate I have another Python code that generates CSV file. So if I run this code, let me load my libraries first. So number of rows, I want each data file to have 10 rows. So I can show what the data frame should look like. The table, this is the CSV file. It is saving it in CSV format here. If I open and show you, it is comma separated and the same column names like what we created in both databases. Okay, so let me delete this and I will start over. So no data in our working directory and no data in our backup location either. The other thing we want to make sure is generate CSV data more frequent, which is every 5 seconds here, and this one every 5 seconds it is generating CSV. This one, what is it generating? Where do I have another one that generates JSON file. Okay, yeah, this one it saves, it creates JSON, so the extension should be JSON. This will be generating JSON file every 10 seconds, and we will check the number of rows in this code. All of them I will put them together and add a link to them. And this one is saving every 5 seconds. This one every 10 seconds it is creating JSON. This one every 5 seconds it will create CSV file. Here we will run and check the number of rows. Let's do it every 5 seconds in the two databases. So since we are writing CSV data to, I think, MySQL, so the number of rows in MySQL should grow up faster. So let's run this project and make sure it deploys successfully. Okay, this has deployed. Now let's generate data by running the Python codes. So here, load these libraries, and this will generate CSV data every 5 seconds, whereas this one, it should generate data every 10 seconds. So if I go here now in my working directory, I see I have 4 CSV files and 1 JSON data. So now it seems it is sending it to the databases you see here. So it is telling us it is giving us high level information. Probably I should have added more loggers here that give more explicit information, but we can check. We can, by running the code that gives the number of rows in both databases, we can see if the number of rows is growing. So if I run this, you see I have my SQL number of rows 130, Postgres 60, MySQL it increased to 142, whereas Postgres it is 64, and so on. So yeah, we see they are growing at different, the number of rows in the two databases is growing at different rates. So in this tutorial we saw how to send data to different destinations based on the data type, or based on a variable. We created a variable by extracting the extension of the file. Then once we have the variable, then we use the choice operation to decide whether to send the data to MySQL or Postgres, and we use it for each operation to send each row, to insert each row, which is an object in this case, to each database. So you see here, almost MySQL has more than double of the number of rows in Postgres, and that makes sense because we are generating data for Postgres every 10 seconds and for MySQL every 5 seconds. So yeah, this is all for this tutorial. This is part 4. So in the previous tutorial we saw how to insert data to both databases using scatter gather in parallel operation, but we may need also to send data to different destinations based on the data type, how important it is, and so on. So this is a demo on that, and in the next tutorial we are going to see how to insert data to databases using URI parameters, query parameters, headers, and so on.